Okay, I think we'll start. It's 11:04. So first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sanjay Chandarana. I'll be your moderator today. I'm based here in Singapore. I'm ACCA qualified. I'm the APAC Finance Director for a company called Wescon International, which is a US MNC, Fortune 250. And Wesco is basically a business-to-business supply chain solutions company. I'd like to welcome you all to the ACCA Virtual Careers Fair for 2022. This is the Singapore leg, and ACCA has a series of global virtual careers fairs. I wish you all a successful day and congratulate you on taking action in your job search today. Okay. I'd also like to thank you for attending this live webinar. The topic of the webinar is trends impacting jobs and skills in accounting roles. Okay, so today we'll explore trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, and then what impact these have in the future, especially on accounting roles. And then from that we can see what kind of skills we will need to adjust to for those impacts. This webinar is held jointly by ACCA and SSG. I assume you all know what ACCA is. SSG is SkillsFuture Singapore, which is a statutory board under the Ministry of Education. I'd also like to introduce my other panelists and the experts on providing insights today. Firstly, if I can introduce Chelvin Loh, who's the Director of Jobs for SkillsFuture Singapore, and she's part of the Skills Insight Division. Also with us is TC Lim, who is also ACCA qualified and is the Executive Director, Finance Transformation Office for Nomura. Today's webinar will be for about an hour. And we'll have a 20-minute presentation from Chelvin from SSG. And then we'll have a 20-minute panel discussion where TC, Chelvin, and myself will discuss various questions. And there'll be time for a Q&A at the end. For the Q&A, you can type questions into the chat, and then we'll try and answer as many of those as we can. So what I'll do at this point is hand over to Chelvin to present her research from SSG.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Good morning to everyone, both attendees from Singapore as well as internationally. Welcome to our virtual fair as well as our webinar. My name is Chelvin, like what Sanjay said. I lead the Job Skills Insights Division in SkillsFuture Singapore. I'll just take the next 20 minutes to talk a little bit about the trends that we see, and how the digital economy, the green economy, for example, is impacting accountancy sector as well as accountancy jobs and skills. Next slide, please. A quick introduction on SkillsFuture Singapore. If to many of our international audience might not be familiar, we are part of Ministry of Education. We look after the continuing education and training ecosystem in Singapore. And starting from last 2 years, in SkillsFuture Singapore, we set up a new team looking at mining the jobs and skills data. We look at mining jobs and skills data of in-job posting data. We look at job and skills profiles of firms in Singapore. We look at jobs and skills profile of frontier firms, locally and internationally, so that we can better anticipate the change and therefore influence our skills supply ecosystem and be able to translate that into training programs that can really benefit our workforce and our enterprises on the ground. Next slide, please. So I just want to set the context of my sharing. If you look at our external environment, we see ourselves coming out of a COVID environment. Many of our our neighbors are also emerging from this pandemic. And we see that for Singapore at least, right, our long-term prospects remain strong. We are still looking at about 3 to 5% growth, which is good, right? And our labor market continues to be quite tight. And at the same time, I think across all the disruptions that COVID has brought, I think the good silver lining, which many of you will probably agree with us, is I think this has also accelerated the digitalisation and the sustainability concerns, as well as emphasis across different sectors and different job roles and you and me, right? And therefore, we think that with this acceleration in the pace of change over the last 2 years, I think this pace of change will increase. And therefore, really, it's really asking ourselves, if it's not a matter of if, but when that the skills that we have becomes irrelevant, then should we take action earlier than later? Next slide, please. So in last November, SkillsFuture Singapore launched our first skills report. We zoomed in on 3 different economies, which cuts across sectors. And the 3 economies are the digital economy, the green economy, and the care economy. The digital economy is the most prevalent in a sense. It cuts across all job roles that we've seen. All job roles, none of the job roles and none of the sectors are spared from digitalization. In fact, if you do a quick count on there are tech-light roles and tech-heavy roles, like what we call it, right? Tech-light roles are really job roles that uses technology, applies technology in their current work. Tech-heavy roles are really job roles that develops technology solutions for their sector or for other sector. And tech-light roles are the ones that we see that's very, very prevalent across the different economies. In fact, we did a count, there are more than 800 job roles across the different economies and across the different sectors that requires technology and what we call tech-light roles, right? Green economy is a bit more nascent, a bit more emerging. We don't just see this in Singapore, but also internationally. In Singapore, when we start to count job roles that requires green skills, we call them green roles, new green roles or greening roles. That means job roles that are adopting some form of green initiatives or making the work processes a lot more sustainable. We see this coming across from more than 17 sectors today, cutting across from manufacturing, of course, to trade and connectivity or your air, land, sea transport, to hospitality, hotel sector, as well as the built environment sector. Care economy is the other one that we think will come up. It's something that's here to stay and it will increase in pace because we are in an aging society, not just in Singapore, but over the world. And a lot of this about emphasis about human health and potential, about health and wellness, about teaching and learning, right, will have to change in a world that's moving towards an aging society. And how do we learn better? How do we age better? How do we maintain our health and wellness better? Even with COVID, how do you look at the mental health part as well? Next slide, please. So in the accountancy sector, we zoom a little bit more on the accountancy sector. We see that actually the accountancy sector are not spared from some of these roles. In fact, I think accountancy sector are at the front center and right, because you can actually, you actually do see a lot of these technologies and these processes changing because the business functions are changing, and therefore accountancy sector then needs to see how we can reinvent ourselves to be able to realign ourselves with the new business environment and the new business opportunities as well. And I think some of this transformation have started. We can zoom in a bit on the key trends in a while. Next slide, please. So here we want to zoom in specifically on 3 particular trends from the digital economy that we think can benefit as well as can impact our accountancy job roles today. One is really about analytics. How do we use behavioral analytics, text mining, data visualization to better present our data, to better present the insights for management, better for decision making. The second one is really about how we can use artificial intelligence to augment what we have from the human intelligence part, right? For example, how do we use better machine learning algos to be able to do text analysis, big data and analytics better, for example, more efficiently. The third one is really about intelligent automation. Now we handle a lot of big data, we handle a lot of data processing. How do we make some of these repetitive tasks more efficient by making use of technologies like RPA, for example? Next slide, please. So today, when we look at the accountancy jobs and skills, we already see some of these skills that are needed already reflected in some of the priority skills required by the sector. Priority skills, we mean skills that are required by more number of job roles. So you see the chart on the left, it lists down some of these top 20 priority skills that we listed. The x-axis on the bottom is actually the number of job roles that requires these skills. So you see that data analytics, digital technology, technology adoption, programming, coding, as well as business process and analysis, the ones that we sort of highlighted in the box, are required by more than 2/3 of our accountancy job roles. So it doesn't matter whether you're back end, front end, tax, or valuation, right? Some of these skills are very important to the job accountancy roles today. On the right, we actually put down, to sort of simplify it for our audience, exactly what we mean by data analytics. There are some definitions that are provided on the slide on the right. Next slide, please. So then we look at, just now that was really about how, what are the jobs that are requiring these skills. Here we want to take a lens from the skill supply side. So we use our labor market intelligence tools. We look into the pool of professionals who are currently in the sector, and we monitor their skills, and we see which are the skills that are trending up the fastest. And on the chart on the left, you see the top 20 fastest growing skills in accountancy in Singapore. And it's interesting, right? You see a lot of these skills revolving around business intelligence and visualization software. You see programming software. You see analytics and data analytics as well. So it's interesting that actually the change is already happening. Individuals in the sector are already picking up some of these emerging skills to help them do their job better. Next slide, please. And when we zoom into specific tracks in the accountancy sector, we spotlight on 2 tracks. One on the left is a risk advisory track. On the right is the business valuation track, both of which are in demand jobs and skills in the accountancy sector. You see that on the left for risk advisory, a lot of the skills that are fastest growing reported by individuals themselves are in areas like machine learning, data management, as well as data analysis, right? On the right side for the business valuation professionals, you see similar trends, but we also see business intelligence that are coming up quite a fair bit, on top of some of the other domain skills in accountancy that you still need to have, right? So these digital skills we think are really augmenting the work that we do in our current, whether it's risk advisory domain or your business valuation domain. Next slide, please. So we want to see how are the job content changing, right, to better make use of these skills. So we zoom in on some of you will see in the next few slides, we start to zoom in some on the job descriptions to see what are employers putting out in their job descriptions that requires individuals to have some of these digital skills. So here we take a look at one enterprise risk manager in the area of business consulting. And then you see some of the skills that are required are like data analytics and data visualization. That really helps augment existing skills in auditing assurance. And you see at the bottom, the requirement ideally is to have data analytics skills as well as digital skills like Tableau, RPA, for example. Next slide, please. Employers at the same time, when they hire valuation analysts, we also see an increasing demand for data and analysis skills. For example, valuation approaches and methodology, you need to start to look at big data to monitor the risk, for example. Also in understanding the impact analysis, right, of some of this risk. And these risks are probably not just at the financial level, but also the macroeconomic and increasingly also in the sustainability space. Next slide, please. So I want to zoom a little bit more into the green economy and how we think it can impact as well as drive the growth in the accountancy sector, right? In fact, I think it's more driving the growth than a negative impact. Here, there's a lot of talk about ESG skills, and I think this really puts accountancy professionals right at the center of some of these decisions that businesses need to make when it comes to building capabilities within a company. Next slide, please. Here in SSG, we see industries from browner activities, or what we call less environmentally friendly technologies, to ones that are more environmentally friendly or more sustainable. So it's really moving from brown to green. The second one is as we move from brown to green, there will be new jobs that are created that will support the new green activities that company needs to take on. At the same time, the large part of our workforce will probably be in these roles called greening roles, as their job content takes on, as existing job roles take on more technology, more environmentally friendly technologies, there are new green skills that are required because the job content within these existing roles are changing. I'll give you some examples later. Next slide, please. So here we're saying the accountancy sector can play a role in driving sustainability in two ways, right? Really, number one is really reducing our own environmental impact and our own carbon footprint. The second one is really the more important one, which is really how the accountancy sector can now look into offering services that can help to guide clients' sustainability efforts. Next slide, please. So some of these existing roles, for example, in risk advisory, we think will start to include some of these new green skills in ESG as well as sustainable finance. So here we look into one of the risk advisory role, but now specializing in sustainability and climate change. You will see that beyond your advisory skills, your risk advisory skills, you will see requirement for ESG skills, environment and social governance skills, non-financial reporting skills as well, looking into how you prepare sustainability integrated reports for the organization, assessing the sustainability risk, as well as risk management, and how do you apply some of these risk and controls, right, to make sure that the company is not just well guarded against the financial risk, but also some of these non-financial and sustainability risks. Next slide, please. There are also new green roles coming up, which I think it bodes well for the accountancy sector as well. New green roles like sustainability consultant. Again, we see similar skills, like what I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, but also some of the more technical and more specialized skills like carbon markets and decarbonization strategies management, really about looking to developing deeper expertise in building, our organization strategy towards minimizing carbon footprint. How do you decarbonize the strategies, and how do you look into risk and financing strategies to finance some of these sustainable engines of growth? Next slide, please. So with all these changes that are happening in our environment, in our economy, as well as the sector, we want to emphasize that it's not just the hard skills that our job seekers need to have, it's also the soft skills. In fact, the soft skills we think really can help to lay the foundation for each of us to build new skills. Next slide, please. In SSG, we have launched what we call the 16 critical core skills. Really, we look into 3 different areas. One is on the left side, it's about how we can increase our ability to think critically. And here there are 5 sets of skills. Many of them will not be new to every one of us. Decision making, problem solving, creative thinking, something that we do, I think, on a day-to-day basis. What's quite interesting here is about sense making. I think what organizations are telling us, how do you sense make when the large pool of data that you're seeing every day? How do you sense make with a lot of the uncertainty that's happening? How do you connect the dots, for example? The second one is really about transdisciplinary thinking. In the area of sustainability, there are a lot of skills that are cross disciplines, right? It's not just the financial skills, not just it's also about the technical skills, also about from this environmentally protection perspective. How do you the blue, the green, for example, how do you bring them all together and make decisions for the organization? The second one that's in the middle, this part is about how do we learn by interacting with others. Again, many of these skills will not be new to a lot of us: collaboration skills, communication skills, developing people as well, right? And customer orientation. What I want to emphasize here is 2 new ones that we've introduced over the last few years. It's on building inclusivity and influencing skills. And I was just sharing this 2 days ago at a manufacturing webinar where a lot of the times, even engineers, right, we need to see how we can build our influencing skills better, not just from our job role perspective, but how do you influence your peers, your suppliers, your clients, in ways that speaks beyond just what the KPI says or the dollars and cents says, right? Building inclusivity, I think with COVID, we've seen a lot of emphasis on this. How do you build workplace inclusivity skills? How do you balance the work-life harmony? And how do you ensure that you have a conducive working environment that you can and how your process are being inclusive to include workforce from different age group, different different types of strengths and capabilities working together. The third one on the right side is how do we stay relevant with all these changes that are happening? How do we stay agile? And here I just want to focus on two particular areas. One is really about learning agility, especially for mid-careerists. How do we stay ahead and be agile in learning every day? Beyond what we've learned in school, beyond what we learn in our formal area of work, how do we learn from one another? How do we learn from problems? How do we learn from setbacks? Self-management is really how do we pick up ourselves, even if there are, even after we go through a certain dip in our careers, how do we pick ourselves up? How do we manage our emotions when we deal with problems and difficult situations? Next slide, please. So for accountancy job roles, what we did is we went into some of the accountancy roles that we mentioned earlier, and we look into our job posting data, and we see that actually there are 5 CCS, 5 critical core skills that are emphasized a lot in by employers in their JDs, right? The first one that you see, the longest yellow bar, which is communication. How can accountancy professionals go beyond the data and beyond the spreadsheets and beyond the balance sheets, for example, to tell the story, to tell the business narrative, and to help the business look ahead of what's to come? And how do we communicate it in a way that businesses, stakeholders can understand? The second one, one of spotlight is really about the part on sense making. This is quite interesting. And it's good that we see this coming out in job posting data for accountancy professionals, because it's really about connecting the dots and sense make what's changing, what's happening, so that you can better decide what to communicate to your business stakeholders, what do you want to choose to communicate to your clients, right? And the last one at the bottom, not really, but just the last on the bottom of this chart is really about customer orientation. It's not about the data. It's not about what our numbers are saying. It's not what about our expertise. It's really about how do we orientate the insights that we have to what makes sense and what is the most important for our customers to make decisions. And we thought that this is quite interesting when we look at this, and we thought it's worthwhile spotlighting this to our job seekers here today. It's not just the technical skills that you should emphasize in your CVs, and when you go for interviews, many of these soft skills are what you've already gleaned, whether it's from the previous jobs or is it already from your for fresh grads, it's really from your training back in school. Next slide, please. So last but not least, we really want to encourage our audience here to take advantage of some of these insights that we're sharing to prepare yourselves ahead. So we have mapped out a very simple 5-step approach, really about looking at number one, what is your personal skill stock, right? What are the skills that you already have, whether it's soft skills or hard skills that you picked up from your previous roles? Many of the jobs, many of these skills are transferable. What do you have that you can bring to your next role? And the second one is really about initiating conversations. Take the first step to initiate conversations with the manager if you are currently employed. If not, you can speak to one of our SkillsFuture skills ambassador that can help you to sort of map what are the job pathways that can better make use of these adjacent and priority skills that you already do possess today. And for the gaps that you think you want to build up more on, what are some of the courses that we can advise you to sign up? And number 4 is really very, very important, is really you need to practice the skills that we learned at work. Even in SSG here, we've got a whole team of 15 job skills analysts. We are practicing our skills every day. How do we communicate these skills? How do we communicate this to our job seekers and our stakeholders? So very much it's about making sure that we have the environment to communicate, and to employers out who are listening to us as well. It's about how we want to create a conducive environment where our workforce and our employees can practice these skills on a day-to-day basis and get feedback, so that we have a very conducive learning environment for everyone. And last but not least, number 5, right on top, is really about for individuals and organizations, how do we keep track of some of these emerging trends, not just in this sector, but also across the sectors, across the economies that will impact you. And in this area, SSG will be putting out more and more of these skills insights. We'll be launching our next skills report 2022 as well in November this year. If you have not already seen our 2021 report, you can scan the barcode, the QR code that's right on top, on the top right corner. Next slide, please. And here we have also the QR code for our critical core skills, as well as the skills descriptors for each of the skills that you can go in, look at the different proficiencies that you might already have, and then start on this journey today. I want to end off with one quote that I've heard from when we launched our skills report last year from our CNA moderator, Dawn Tan. I think many of you are familiar with her. She's always on the news these days, right? Really about today, we think a lot about investing in our bank account, about how much what kind of assets are we investing in? How can we maximize the return on investment on our financial assets? I think we don't think enough about how much assets are we putting in ourselves in terms of skills, and what kind of training can we invest in ourselves to maximize these assets. And my challenge, my challenge to everyone here today, including myself every day, is really, should we take the first step to think a lot more deliberately about these decisions and make the choice, the most important choice in ourselves, and help ourselves to grow, not just professionally, but also as an individual. With that, maybe I'll come to an end, and then I'm open and happy to take questions later on. Thank you. Back to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Chelvin. Thank you for that presentation. It's very informative, and I'm sure it's provided a great resource to the people attending the webinar. And I'm glad it's available as a download so people can then go into afterwards, spend a bit more time going through it. For the people on the webinar, I'd say, look, there's a lot of takeaways there. Chelvin spoke about some of the high growth sectors. If you're looking for a job, these are sectors that you can definitely look at, green, digitalisation, care. They're obviously going to be hiring if they're growing, okay? And the other part of the report, I think, is just the core skills, business intelligence, visualization, adaptability, digital influence, all of these different skills. I think it's worth looking at those, looking at your CV, seeing which ones you actually tick off. So when you're doing your cover letter, when you're doing your CV, you make sure you highlight those. Even in the interview, you make sure you talk about those. So I think that's very, very important. And the fact that it's research, they're looking at lots of different jobs that are out there, and looking at what people are asking for. You can kind of look at, okay, this is where I am today. I tick these ones. I don't tick these. That's something you can work towards in terms of just fulfilling that. So you become more kind of rounded and more employable, more valuable. There is a question actually, Chelvin, that's come up. It's from Vikas. It says, may I know, SkillsFuture is only available for locals and SPR or open for all?
SkillsFuture, all our insights are open to everyone. Anybody from any parts of the world can download some of these insights. In fact, our courses are open to everyone as well. Some of the funding we might differentiate for locals and permanent residents with some higher rates of funding, but otherwise the courses are open to everyone.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so at this point, we'll move across to the panel discussion. So I've got kind of a range of questions which I'll pose to the panelists here. TC, if I can pose the first question to you. So the first question is, what do you see as the main opportunities and risks to business growth in your sector for the next 3 years?
Yeah, thanks. I think listening to Kevin's presentation just now, I think she covered quite a lot of the things, right? I think in terms of obviously opportunities, we're talking about things like, how do we automate our processes? How do we make use of data analytics to add value? And how do we leverage on all this ESG? And also, of course, how do we improve our overall team's skills, especially soft skills and all that, right? So I think Kevin more or less covered quite a lot of interesting examples when we talk about it just now, I think.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for that, TC. Chelvin, do you have anything else to add?
I think the most important challenge is really deciding from an organization perspective, what are some of the key priorities that you want to focus on? Because there are, I mean, to be frank to all of us, I think there are multiple challenges that are being thrown at us. From an enterprise perspective, I think it's not an easy task to navigate and deciding what's most important. But I thought that for the accountancy sector at least, and accountancy professionals, this is one sector that is able to look ahead. Of course, the numbers can tell one thing, somewhat hindsight, for example, But with sense, if you can sense big enough, and we look at some of the data that can also speak to in using more predictive analytics, for example, and talking to your clients, for example, I think accountancy professionals and sector is at the forefront. They can anticipate some of these change better. And therefore, I think really it's about how do we come together as an ecosystem where the clients are accountancy professionals coming together to support, and some of the things that SSG and WSG can do from a jobs and skills perspective, and then help companies to make sense and decide on what are some of these priorities that you want to start first and invest deliberately in some of these capabilities. And hiring, of course, hiring local talent is definitely one key area, because it's really about building your own timber. Like what MAS always says, right? Build your own timber, invest in our people today, because they are here to really help you to grow in the next lap, in the next mile. Yeah. Thank
you for that, Chelvin. I think for me, I'm just kind of more centered around the business that I'm in. I think supply chain issues recently have been a major concern. That they've kind of slowed down. Post-pandemic, as growth, as Chelvin said, Singapore, we're looking at 3 to 5%, which is great. But it's things like, supply chain issues. We've had a chip shortage. Freight has been difficult.
That's right.
So, those kind of things are definitely a risk for us. The pandemic, obviously, it's a bad thing, and a lot of people have suffered from it. But there is a silver lining in the sense of what it's brought. It's accelerated changes in the workplace. Some of these create risk, but some of these also create opportunities. So, things like digitalisation has advanced, has accelerated because we've been forced to work at home. Going forward, that's something that would have taken 5 or 10 years to do, is now happened very quickly in terms of people working remotely, hybrid working, collaborating online. That's a different skill that we didn't have before. That's been built as we've gone through. And I think because of the pandemic, we've had to build business continuity plans. But all companies are very strong now. They're kind of, okay, if this happens, I can deal with it like this. So I think that there is some silver lining to it. I think in terms of, for my particular business, regulation, greater regulation is also causing a risk here. But there is sectors that have grown because of the pandemic, have grown because of digitalization, and as Chelvin pointed out, you had the green economy, you've got care, all of these things have grown. So there's opportunity there, and I think because of the fact that everything's been, the economies have been low over the last couple of years, there's a pent-up demand, which if you're in the right place, you're going to be able to service that demand. So I think that's a great opportunity going forward.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so the second question. So Chelvin, if you're not tired of talking, I'll pose this one to you first. So what are your priorities in talent attraction, development, and retention of accounting and finance talent? Priorities in attracting, developing, retention.
I think this is many facets to this, and I think on its own, talent attraction, it probably warrants one discussion on its own, rather than and across all the three, from attraction to development and retention. I think the jobs transformation map that Minister of Manpower launched a couple of months back, it does show that there are certain job roles, for example, that have their job functions and work functions having more impact based on these technologies versus the others. There are also job roles that, because of the technologies and the changing work functions, they're increasing demand. I think from a attraction perspective, of course, it's about how can we attract more talent that can take on these roles, the in-demand roles, right? And based on that, what kind of skills do employers looking for today? Can employers not just hire fully skilled, but also hire semi-skilled talent to go into these roles and groom them on the job, provide the learning environment to help to groom them? So that's the development part and the attraction part, right? The question is also about development. How do you help to groom someone who is deemed as one of the roles where technology might seem to have a bigger impact, moving them towards another area of job role within your company that that you can see certain adjacencies in your jobs and your work functions and your key tasks, and give them the chance to move into these in-demand roles. Because anyway, for some of these in-demand roles, you really do need to build out a talent pipeline. But also many of these areas are new, the skills are new, the content is new. Question is, do you always need to bring in a fully skilled talent who already has the space, but also there's a scarcity of talent in those areas? And invest in our workforce, especially in your own workforce today, who might already be very familiar with the company, but just don't have some of these specialized skills in some of these newer areas and these newer capabilities the company require. So I think it's really about taking stock of the skill stock of each company, looking at the strengths of each of your employees. Because actually, I will well imagine not everyone will want to move into certain job roles. Some are from a preference perspective, from a mindset perspective. Some prefers to stay back end. Some are more open to come to the front end, for example, and therefore be able to have that conversations with each and every one of the employees, right? And also then deliberately having this learning and development conversations with the staff, not just as at the L&D division, but also as part of the various business functional leads. I think to me, that's the greatest challenge, because the speed of change is really quite fast that we're seeing in some of the tech sectors, for example. Even in tech sectors, for example, they're emphasizing a lot on coaching skills. We see a lot of emphasis on business consulting, coaching skills, for example, people development skills in some of these sectors. Why? Because they really need to attract the talent and keep the talent. And therefore, we think even in a sector like accountancy, as well as the related sectors that accountancy support, I think this is one key strategy and one key challenge that I'll encourage employers who are listening in to think deliberately about. Sorry, a very long answer to your very short question.
No, but I think you covered a lot of it there, to be honest. And I think employers have to change. And it's always very valuable if you promote internally and you train people up to do the next level of role. I think that's very important. That says a lot to the existing workforce and people that are coming in. They say, hang on, this company actually wants to develop me. So you're more likely to stay, more likely to join. So I think it's very valuable. In the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll skip to the next question and ask you that one, TC. So kind of very similar, but what do you think your main challenge is in attracting, retaining accounting and finance talent is, and how do you address this? So what's really the challenge and how do you address it?
I think one of the key challenge is really the fact that there is, I would say, maybe you call it a skill shortage or you call it talent shortage, right? In the sense that, if you look at, I guess, across all the accounting firms or people doing accounting roles now, a lot of people would have what I call BAU skills, how to produce journals, check reconciliations, and produce verify financial statements and all that. But very few people have what you call future skills, in the sense of ability to transform that process, look at process and say what's the best way to do it, introduce new tools, and learn how to implement things like new data visualization tools like Tableau, Power BI, and I think that is where that skill shortage is. And to be fair, it's quite challenging because these people are in demand, right? You can hire somebody, you probably have to pay them a lot more, and then before you know it, 1 or 2 years down the road, they got some experience, they're going to move for a lot more somewhere else. So I guess that's probably the question for, I guess, SkillsFuture, right? How do you churn out more of that kind of talent in locally, right? I think that's where probably the challenge is. I think everybody is looking for this kind of talent, right? Process mapping skills, data analytics skills, automation skills, all those things that Kevin mentioned is shortage, right? And I guess our strategy, obviously, you could always a few options, right? One, you train internally. 2, you hire the talent, or 3rd is why do it ourselves, outsource to somebody.
That's right.
So there's all these options, and that's all things that we try to explore, right? But I think so training wise, we do invest in training massively in the past few years. But to be honest, again, as Kevin said, not out of 100 people, not all 100 will want to pick up the new skills, and
right.
we find that, again, it's to be fair, it's quite challenging again to even convert maybe 10 of that 100 to do the new things. And then you hiring, again, we talk about that already, is competitive market, and then getting a firm to do it for you is not cheap. So I think it's all not an easy solution, right? In that sense.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of challenges, and I think it's a lot of volatility from different places, and that's really what's creating the challenges. For me, just to add to what you said there, TC, is I think the other thing is it's become more of a two-way street. It's in the past used to be, okay, this is the company, this is how we do things. If you want to join, you join. Otherwise, it's okay. Now it's different. It's a two-way street. You've got to have that conversation with the employee. And it's also, new generations coming into the workforce, they view it differently. And you've got to kind of change just basic things like you've got to change the office layout to be more conducive to the newer generation. Instead of just being this open plan thing with a couple of offices where the managers sit, it's got to be, more open plans, got to be huddle rooms, conference rooms, areas people can socialize. So I think that changes, and that's all kind of comes back down to culture. You've got to build a culture that is attractive to employees. And to the particular talent, and one thing may appeal to a particular role, may not appeal to somebody else. So you've got to be kind of very inclusive with that. And Chelvin, I think you mentioned it before, kind of inclusion and diversity is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And people generate different ideas because they're different, right? And you've got to foster a thing where it's inclusive, so everyone feels valued, everyone can put their point of view across. The other challenge I see is I think people are very worried about some of this digitalization. So hang on, I'm going to lose my job now because the machine's going to take over, or a piece of software is going to do that. I think it's the wrong way to look at it. It's kind of, you've got to look at it, okay, the tedious stuff that I'm doing today, somebody else, some other software can take that over. I then have more time to do more value add things. And I think companies are just looking for more value add. In the past, I think finance, accounting were cost centers. Now they're not. They can actually add true value to the business and actually generate more business. Okay, so going to the next question. This one's for you, Chelvin.
I think Daniel has a question for Sanjay and for TC and yourself.
Okay.
On the chat.
So TC, it says, as you are both qualified accountants and have pivoted your roles from traditional accountancy to senior roles in finance and transformation, could you share how portable your ACCA qualification is and how that's helped you to navigate?
Okay, maybe I answer that in a different way. I qualified for ACCA maybe like 20 years ago.
Same. Yeah.
Obviously, whatever 30 years ago we learned is, I would say, BAU skills. And ACCA has obviously been changing the syllabus. I participated in some of these changes, and I developed automation module for them. So they've been changing the syllabus, and I think that's how ACCA in particular keep themselves relevant. And we all know that we talk about it today. Obviously, accountants need new skills. Obviously the fundamental skills still needs to be there. People still need to know how double entry work. If things go into the system, I got people who tell me, the system provide me the answer, doesn't quite work, right? What happened to system breakdown? I need to do something. You still need to know the basics, but obviously there are a lot more skills that is more important than that, soft skills and all that. So I think ACCA is adjusting that, right? So I think the possibility is more, ACCA itself is changing, but for us individually, we also need to constantly learn, right? So in the last few years, I have taken machine learning course, I have taken process re-engineering course and all sorts of courses just to make sure that I'm updated, right? So in the industry, you need to know what's ABCD, right? Artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, data analytics. If you don't know, go and figure out, right? And basically that's all you need to learn. And so that constant learning is also important. And I think ACCA has a CPE and all that, which is very relevant and useful, right?
Yeah, no, and to be fair, TC, I'm exactly the same as you. I qualified many years ago. In those days, it was really about accounting standards and cash flow and so on. And it's evolved. And what's nice is ACCA has evolved with what's required. So obviously you need the standards, you need to be a qualified accountant, but there's also lots of additional things that are available, which then creates a more rounded individual. And for me, I know sometimes CPD is annoying for me because I have to complete it by the end of the year, but it's very good because it drives me to learn new things, right? Things are relevant, but something new to me. So I think it's been partly ACCA, and it is portable. And I think for me, I've changed and worked in different countries. I think same for UTC, and that's something I could take with me everywhere because it's a global organization. That really helps a lot. Okay, so the fourth question for Chelvin. I know you're trying to avoid this, but by trying to distract me with Daniel's question. Okay, so what are the skill sets? And I think you've answered a lot of this through your presentation, but what are the skill sets that are most demanded in finance and accountancy?
I must say a lot of, like what TC said, a lot of the BAU skills are still important. It cannot be that you go into accounting firm and you don't know book entry. I mean, you don't know your ledger balance, etc. Right? You need those BAU skills. But I think what is increasingly in demand that we see in job posting data, that we see not just in locals picking up the skills, but also internationally, accountancy picking up the skills are really cross-cutting skills. Cross-cutting in the area of how you use digital tools to navigate your work, to improve your work. How do you look at your area of work? How does it support the sustainability agenda of your company, for example? How does it help to deliver better decision-making capabilities for your companies or for your clients, right? About as if you are a supervisor or you are a team leader in an accountancy firm, how do you develop your team so that there is opportunity for everyone to develop as the work grows? For in the area of like, for example, if you are using RPA, for example, how do you proactively redesign the work for your team so that they still find the work meaningful and they don't take away the fear from the technology itself? And at the end of it, everyone is, when you call it a day, at the end of it, there is job satisfaction, and then there's satisfaction in not just this as a job, but this is a career that you're going into. I think these skills that I mentioned are not found in, are probably not so neatly written out. So a lot of it are some of it are what I mentioned about in the care, the digital, and the green economy, also in the CCS. But I really think at the end of it, for an individual to think about it, prioritize what are the skills you want to invest in yourselves. Because there are many of the skills the employers will want, and if it's not current employer, your new employer will want, is skills that you your peers are already picking up. So if your peers are thinking about it, maybe you should also think about it. But at the end of the day, if you need to say what are the top 3 skills that I want to make myself put out in the market, then go zoom in on these top 5 skills that you want and make sure that you can talk a lot about it in your CV. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chelvin. TC, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think it's important to highlight that obviously different roles require different skills, and you know there are future different roles, right? And obviously they require future different skills, right? In the sense that, you know, do all of us want to learn Python and try to automate stuff? Not necessary, right? There's a demand for people to automate stuff, there's demand for people to build dashboards, and there's demand for people to interpret data and add value. They're all different skills, and obviously these are potentially different jobs. So I guess as Kevin earlier said, you know, people need to understand what area I'm playing first, and then acquire those skills. No point trying to learn everything because that's probably too much. At the same time, also got to be conscious that skills change over time, right? In the sense, you know, automation now might be in fashion. You know, if you know Power BI, Tableau, you're probably in super demand, but I bet in 5 years' time, you know, the schools are churning out people who knows Power BI, Tableau, or in all the schools and polys and all that. You know, it might become just something that is almost like Excel, right? You need to know how to use it. Then you need to move on to the next level of skill if you want to continue to be leading, right? So I guess that also changed over time, right? So I guess that's why we have CPE, SPD, right? You know, you need to constantly upgrade yourself to make sure you're one step ahead, right?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, TC. It's looking forward. You can't just kind of stick with what you got today. Look forward. What's going to change? What skills do I need? And you upgrade to that constantly, which is great. Okay, so one final question before we move to the Q&A. I'll stay with you, TC. What advice or key takeaways would you give to our job seekers in this virtual careers fair, or someone who's at an inflection point in their career?
I guess the important thing is be flexible, be willing to learn new things and be willing to try new things, right? Because if you are in the kind of mindset, my daughter's school called growth mindset, then in my view, you will never struggle to find another role, even in a completely different area. Whereas if you just wants to do exactly what you've done before in the similar and find a role that's exactly the same, then I think you'll struggle a bit more, right?
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Chelvin, same question for you. Key takeaways.
Yeah. In my line of work, I mean, we my team and I, we pivoted ourselves as well, right? From a previous role to what we do today. It's an entirely new role. We picked up a lot of the skills on the job. We provide ourselves with the space and the opportunity to learn. I think the learning agility is super duper important, because you can have different people looking at the same problem, but come up with very different solutions and very different perspectives, right? So I think that the learning agility is super duper important. And also, I think it's really about giving yourself the space to pick up some of the skills. It's about coming across whether, even if you don't have 100% of the skills today, is to be upfront and to be frank. But how do you convince employers that you have the ability to learn, and you're willing to pick up the skills? And if you have and some of these adjacent skills that you already have, they can put you in a better position compared to the others. And maybe in not just within your previous role that you're in, outside your role, what are the other things that you're doing that actually helps you to build some of these soft skills that will help you put you ahead in your job search? So I think there are many things. So it's like, for example, we have seen staff who come to us. I've recruited an ex-teacher who came from MOE coming over to our role. So he did a specialist diploma in business analytics and on his own, right? And he's doing continuous improving himself. So I think some of this learning agility is super duper important. And how can he see a role, even without coming to his role, he can see, actually, I can value add this area. If you give me a chance, I think I can do this. Although I don't have 100% of what you need, but I'm prepared to learn. And I've shown myself how I can learn in other ways I've done in previously. So I think for job seeker, these are probably the kind of conversations that you really want to start. And for employers who are not prepared to think about these, I think it's okay, it's no loss to you, but look for the employers prepared to have that conversation for you, because I think those employers are the ones that you can invest in your time, invest for at least a longer period of time.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
I think between both of you, you've kind of covered the main kind of takeaways. The only other thing I'll add to that is obviously we talk about digitalisation, we talk about all these different skills we need. I think a skill that we've always needed is soft skills. In the past, I think accountants may have been, stuck in a cupboard somewhere and they don't interact too much, but now we're required to interact. We have to have the soft skills. We need to be able to persuade people. We need to be able to put across, commentary. What do the numbers tell us? What do we have? We need to be able to communicate all of those. We need to be able to collaborate with different people. So I think that the soft skills one is still very, very important. Has always been in the past, but I think it's even more so now. That's right.
And I think I want to add, accounting to me is a growth role, because every sector requires accounting. Every sector requires, right? Depending on whichever sector, if so as your company, you need to do something along those lines, right? Question is, how can accounting professionals value add from a business perspective, not just the numbers? I think that's the key part.
Yeah, absolutely right. I totally agree. All right, thank you for that, TC and Chelvin. I think it was an interesting discussion. Hopefully the audience got some value out of this. We'll now move to the Q&A section. We've only got about 3 minutes left. So if anybody's got questions, please just put them into the chat and we'll try and answer them. So either people are shy or just we've been very thorough and there's no questions. Okay. So I've been told that we've been very thorough. So okay, all right. Well, I'll bring the webinar to an end now. I'd like to thank both the panelists. TC, Chelvin, it's been very informative. And I'd also like to thank everybody that listened and attended this webinar. Hopefully it's been useful to you. Hopefully you get some takeaways, apply that to your job search, and you gain some additional knowledge to be able to help you with that. I wish you, all the best with your job search. I hope you find the ideal role for you today.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Thanks.